And welcome to At Issue. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time spent with Congressman Aaron Schock. Congressman, thank you for joining us again. It's always good to have you on the program.
Good to be with you.
We've got lots to talk about in only a half hour, so let's start first with your trip to South Africa. You led the delegation, the U.S. delegation from the House and Senate to the memorial service for Nelson Mandela. Short trip. How did it go?
Well, it was a short trip. It was 19.5-hour flight from Washington, D.C. to Johannesburg, and we were literally on the ground for 18 hours, but we're able to be a part of history in recognizing a guy who not only led his country, but went through tremendous turmoil personally, as well as witnessed his entire country struggle with apartheid, overcome that, and help lead the reconciliation in his country. It was remarkable to see who he brought together, even in his death, to see not only Raul Castro, but Barack Obama on the same stage together, eulogizing the same man, tells you the breadth of support and respect that Nelson Mandela had from around the world. 100 sitting heads of state from 100 different countries came to Johannesburg, making the long flight to honor him and his legacy. And so we had the largest delegation of any country in the world. We had many South Africans come by where we were seated and say thank you to America, not only for what you did in helping us resolve apartheid, but also in coming to honor our great president, Nelson Mandela.
On the trip, you were joined by about 20 other members of Congress. You were there with some people who really knew what Nelson Mandela went through. Congressman Lewis, who of course was down in the South when civil rights was passed, and others. Do you get a different perspective when you're on the airplane with them and talking to them?
Absolutely. I mean, not only was it historic to be there honoring Nelson Mandela for what he did, but to be on the trip with members who were a part of that effort and a part of the fight. You mentioned John Lewis. John Lewis is not only a civil rights leader here in the United States of America, he's the last living speaker of the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, and inspires a lot of people here in America. But ironically, when John Lewis went to South Africa about a decade ago to meet with Nelson Mandela, it was Nelson Mandela who had John Lewis's book from his time in prison and gave it to John Lewis and said, please sign this. You've been an inspiration to me and in our fight for civil equality here in South Africa. So how crazy that a man in the United States who's still living, I serve with in Congress, who's on the Ways and Means Committee with me, was an inspiration and someone that Nelson Mandela took encouragement from. Charlie Rangel, who is a colorful character that serves with me on the Ways and Means Committee, it was his amendment, the Rangel Amendment. It was a tax provision that was signed into law that Congress passed that cracked down on further sanctions on the South African government because they were unwilling to end apartheid. And it was because of those sanctions and U.S. companies pulling out of South Africa that the South African government finally said, okay, we cry uncle, we'll negotiate. They brought Mandela out of prison, and Mandela and the current president at the time negotiated the end of apartheid.
De Klerk?
De Klerk, correct. And it was the Congress's role. It was Congress's act. A lot of times we think the president alone does foreign policy, but whether it's the deal on Iran most recently or whether it was ending apartheid, Congress, our sanctions, and the actions of what we do here in the United States certainly has an effect around the world and in advancing freedom for all people.
I want to talk about Iran in just a moment, but first, you mentioned how the death of Nelson Mandela brought so many people together who came from disparate backgrounds and opinions. So how can we take the life of Nelson Mandela and somehow imprint it upon Congress so that Congress gets rid of partisanship to the degree it can, and starts to compromise a little bit more?
Well, I think first the delegation was a great start. I mean, it was the yin and yang of Congress. You had not only about 20 members of the Congressional Black Caucus who were on the trip, but you had Ted Cruz, who's is about as far right as you get from the Tea Party in the Senate. Ted Cruz on the trip, along with the Congressional Black Caucus, myself, who's pretty much, I would say, in the center. But you had a good microcosm of the Congress on that trip, all of us unified behind one purpose. And so I think you're seeing more of that even with the latest budget deal that was passed in the House last week. And hopefully we will see more of that. Each one of us controls ourselves. I'm a big believer that if you want to change the institution, you can begin with yourself. And I think anyone who's watched my behavior knows that I'm one that's been trying to get people to work together. The reason we have some level of partisanship, and we should, is because there are people with different views of the world, different views on policy. And people should be able to debate those policies, those views in the forum of the greatest democracy on earth, in the forum of the lawmaking bodies that was established by our Constitution, the House and the Senate. Things move slowly in our government. They were meant to be that way. And when you look around the world, as frustrating sometimes as Washington, D.C. can be, I would still argue it's the best place from a democratic government standpoint than any other country on the face of the planet. So hopefully this will bring more bipartisanship, more working together. I think what it did for me more than as a lawmaker, but just as a human being, is it made me reflect on what does forgiveness and what does reconciliation really mean? Because it's easy to talk about forgiveness, it's easy to talk about reconciling your differences, but when you look at a man's life who lived in a segregated country under apartheid in South Africa, whose ability for economic progress up the food chain, whose ability for his kids to be able to get jobs and work in the economy were limited, and finally who was imprisoned for 27 years and finally released, he didn't seek spite, he didn't seek settling scores or to go after those who had oppressed him. Rather, he encouraged them to be a part of the rebuilding effort. He put people from the former President de Klerk's administration into his administration. He walked the walk, which was really reconciliation, forgiveness, and not looking to the past, but really looking to the future. And that's what he talked about all through his presidency and even after post-presidency. So I think, who am I to hold a grudge against someone who might say something mean or nasty about me, even if it's just a constituent or a friend? Who am I to really hold a grudge against people when I haven't been in prison for 27 years and had the atrocities committed against me like so many others?
You described yourself as being from the center just a couple of sentences ago. What efforts have you made? And in view of the fact that right next door in the 17th Congressional District, Congresswoman Bustos has touted her desire to reach across the aisle, have you talked to Congresswoman Bustos? Have you talked to others about trying to find some sort of common ground on these issues of immigration, of farm bill, et cetera?
Sure. Well, with regards to Sherry Bustos, I think I was the first member of Congress to reach out to her after her election. And my district chief of staff, Carol Myrna, met with her and helped her set up her district offices throughout her district. And she wrote me a nice note afterwards saying that she didn't expect that and she appreciated the fact that our folks who've been in the office for decades and their expertise, that they could help some of their newer staff get their feet on the ground. But on a policy side, I've been out front on the transportation and highway bill for years, that we need a longer term funding stream, working with my Democratic colleagues to put some ideas on the table. The farm bill the same way. I've been a big proponent of getting that done. Have voted on all of those various bipartisan farm bills that have passed out of the House. Brought together different caucuses. When I got to Congress, we started the Columbia Caucus with Greg Meeks, who is a Democratic congressman from New York. He and I started the Columbia Caucus, which was really the initiative that changed the tide in support of the passage of the Columbia Trade Agreement, which was huge for farmers in my district and Caterpillar in my district. Most recently started an effort with Tulsi Gabbard, a Democratic colleague of mine from Hawaii, called the Future Caucus, and it's getting now this critical mass of young people in Congress together on a regular basis. There's now 40 members of Congress under the age of 40, unprecedented in our country's recent history. When I got to Congress, 5 years ago, there were 4 of us under the age of 40. Now there's 40 of us. So while age isn't everything, I think it presents an opportunity there's 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats, ironically, for us to get together and say, you know what, rather than these fights over 3-month and 6-month battles, let's look at the scope of the challenges facing our country economically, fiscally, from an education and competitiveness standpoint, and let's offer up some ideas that 20 Republicans and 20 Democrats can actually embrace that will then provide some cover to our leadership to get behind. Because one thing I've noticed about our leaders is oftentimes they're unable to be leaders. They're unable to put risky proposals out there because their right flank and their left flank have got their knives out for them, and it makes it very difficult for them to lead. And this latest budget deal is a case in point example, because had Patty Murray, the Democrat in the Senate, and Paul Ryan, the Republican in the House, not reached an agreement, and had their dozen Republicans and dozen Democrats in the House and the Senate who were on the conference committee reached agreement and brought it then to the floor of the House, I'm not sure it would have passed. I'm not sure that same agreement, if John Boehner would have walked out with it by himself, or if Harry Reid would have walked out with it by himself, if it would have passed. It required some conversations, some negotiations behind closed doors, and make that deal happen before they could bring it forward in a very kind of arms-locked bipartisan way. And so we're trying to do that on some of these other important issues. First with the Future Caucus, because there's a group of us that are young and ambitious and don't want to, keep kicking the can down the road and only solving problems for the next 3 months or 6 months.
Let's talk about that budget arrangement. It's a first step. It does not reduce, over the next 10 years, it does not reduce the deficit significantly. It eliminated the sequestration cuts, $63 billion worth, but it initiated a detailed $85 billion in round numbers in cuts. More needs to be done. I mean, it did not address the issue of, the long-term unemployment, not extended. It doesn't talk about tax loopholes. It doesn't talk about tax structure. Is that in the offing?
Well, as with any marriage or any partnership, you have to have a willing party. And what I would say from my perspective as a House member, the House of Representatives is the only body to propose a budget that balances over the next 10 years. The House of Representatives passed that budget. It's the only budget that balances over the next 10 years. The Senate's budget never balances. The President's budget never balances. So when you look at where the two parties were in terms of the extremes, we weren't going to get a budget that balances in 10 years like the House offered, coming from the Senate and the President. They're just ideologically, I would argue, on a different planet when it comes to spending. The President came to our conference at the beginning of the year after he was reelected and plainly said, I'm sorry, the federal government is not a business, it's not a state, and its budget doesn't have to balance. Now, I disagree with him on that, but he's the President of the United States, he got reelected, and so he's, has every right to fight for his stated position. So at the end of the day, you're right. This deal for the next 2 years on spending does not dramatically change our trajectory on spending because it doesn't touch what consumes 2/3 of our budget, and that is 3 programs: Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Those 3 programs consume 2/3 of the $3.5 trillion we spend every year. And until, I would argue, my Senate colleagues are willing to put Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security reform on the table, and we have a president who's willing to lean in on it, as Reagan did in '86 with the help of Tip O'Neill, the Democrat leader in the House, until we have a president and a Senate who's willing to partner with us on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security reform, you're not going to see the significant spending reductions. I voted for the deal for this reason. It further reduces spending by $21 billion. So had we just kept spending at the current rates without a deal, we would have spent $21 billion more over the next 10 years. So it's not significant. It's not as much as I would want. And to anyone who would say, well, Aaron, what is your better idea? I would say, I've already voted on it. It's the House passed budget. It's the budget that passed that balances over the next 10 years, that does, to your point, tax reform, that gets rid of all the loopholes and lower the rates, that does Medicare reform and Social Security reform, often called the Paul Ryan Medicare reform. And again, I would say we don't have to pass those proposals on their face, but if you don't like our Medicare reforms, if you don't like our Social Security reforms, then the Senate needs to put something on the table, because doing nothing is not a solution, and doing nothing ensures that those programs that our seniors currently rely on and that future seniors will rely on are in jeopardy of going away, just as we've seen here in the pensions in our state. When we refuse to deal with the growing pension liability, it means that future pension recipients receive fewer benefits. And that's what's going to happen with Social Security and Medicare the longer we wait to deal with those tough decisions.
And for the record, we probably should point out that the Senate, as we tape this program, has not voted yet on that compromise budget agreement. They're scheduled for...
I'm confident it'll pass.
Okay. You heard it from the congressman.
If it won't, I'm going to be having Christmas in Washington, D.C.
Let's turn to the Farm Bill. You mentioned that.
Yep.
It hasn't passed. There hasn't been I believe Frank Lucas is the House Committee Chair, and Congressman Lucas said, we're on the right path. Do you have any insight as to what that means in terms of SNAP programs? Because supplemental nutrition used to be food stamps, is part of that. Do you have any insight?
So the House passed a version, the Senate passed a version, and now we're in conference committee. So you're right, the conferees have not, the House and the Senate have yet to reach an agreement. The first challenge was SNAP. The first challenge was food stamp numbers. My understanding is that Frank Lewis and his counterpart in the Senate have reached an agreement on a number in terms of savings within the food stamps program. But the issue is now on the commodities portion of the commodities portion of the Farm Bill. And you have these territorial fights with the peanut and cotton growers in the South, which get direct payments, the corn growers in my district, which do not get direct payments, but the crop insurance is so important to them. The sugar beet producers up in Minnesota and that portion of the country, they get direct payments. They get, basically, we subsidize sugar in our country. So that's the fight, because dairy is another subsidy that we offer. So the House's version, just for the record, got rid of assistance for dairy, for cotton, for peanuts, got rid of assistance for sugar. So the House's position was, we're going to stop subsidizing those crops. Well, those organizations, those farmers, went over to the Senate, and those senators who are looking out for their entire state have a much more ability as a single senator to stop a bill. And so they are fighting to protect their commodity portion of the Farm Bill. But the reason it's not resolved is because it's a tough bill to pass, because you've got all these different moving parts to it. But one thing is for sure, we can do better than we are currently with farm policy. And until we pass a new farm bill, current farm policy and food stamp policy is the law of the land. So a lot of folks don't recognize that if we don't do some reforms in food stamps, we're going to keep spending the same amount of money we've spent on food stamps. If we don't do anything with the farm bill, the commodity portion of the bill, we're going to keep spending the same amount on that program. And the House's bill cut tens of billions of dollars over the 5-year period of the Farm Bill that we passed. And we may not cut $20 billion, for example, but if we can cut $5 billion or $10 billion or some number in between there, I think that will be progress for open markets, free markets, and more of a less taxpayer subsidized agriculture industry in our country, and at the same time making sure that people who are getting food stamps are truly people who need it. Income and asset verification, I don't think, is too much to ask for if you're going to get your brothers and sisters and neighbors' tax dollars to pay for your food. We want to make sure those people actually need it.
Let's talk about another law of the land. That's the Affordable Care Act. It is the law. It will be implemented in a matter of a week and a half or so. It struggled in the implementation portion of this. What positives do you see coming out of this? Because healthcare was an industry that needed reform. I mean, it was increasing too much in premiums, too much in the bottom line costs. What's your take on the Affordable Care Act as it's implemented, or another phase is implemented in 2014?
Well, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I think the Affordable Care Act is anything but affordable. I think the law to date has been an unmitigated disaster, and despite the House's series of attempts to give the president a lifeline and say, let's give you another year to implement this, we understand the website needs to work, he gave us his hand and said, I want no stalling. I want no delay. We're going to move forward with this thing. It's ready to go. And we've had two big problems. Number one, the rollout, the website. People are being told to get onto a website that doesn't work, to buy health insurance that they don't want, and if they don't do it by January 1, they're going to be taxed. So there is a problem with just the implementation. The second bigger problem, I would argue, though, is not with implementation, it's just the underlying law. Basically, we have deemed over half of Americans' health insurance as inadequate. And what that means is basically we're telling people that, I'm sorry, H, you might like your health insurance, you might like your doctor, you might like your plan, but I, Healthcare and Family Services, HHS, are telling you it's not adequate. So I'm telling you you can't buy that healthcare product that you were buying. Now, that number one violates the president's pledge, which was if you like your healthcare coverage, you're going to be able to keep it. But number two, it establishes a floor in the healthcare market where there was a ceiling. In other words, there isn't a health insurance policy in Central Illinois, whether you work for State Farm, whether you work for Caterpillar, whether you work for RLI Insurance, their healthcare plans don't meet the minimum standard of what adequate healthcare coverage is. And so those companies, those individuals that provide health insurance to their employers are having to buy more expensive healthcare products if they want to do the right thing and continue to provide for their employees. Why is that a problem? Well, the president said when the bill passed, we're going to make healthcare more affordable. The average healthcare plan is going to go down by $2,500 a year. We haven't found a single healthcare plan that's gone down by $2,500 a year. And the premise was we're going to put everybody on this healthcare program and better disperse the expenses among old but also young. And the final problem for the president is the young people are not signing up for the health care coverage, and they're not signing up because it doesn't make economic sense for them. Young people prior to the Affordable Care Act didn't sign up because they thought they were Superman, quite frankly. They thought, I'd rather pay my cell phone bill than pay $80 a month for my health care plan. However, the Affordable Care Act now says that no health care plan in America can provide health insurance to a young person for any less than 1/3 the most expensive healthcare plan that they offer. It's called community rating. And what that means is that as a young person, my health insurance is no longer my cost to the healthcare system, it's my cost plus a portion of my father and grandfather's cost to the healthcare. So what was, I would argue, affordable healthcare prior to Obamacare for young people who are healthy and don't cost a lot to insure, their premiums have shot up the most, and so their penalty for non-compliance is $100. So most of them are saying, I'd rather pay the $100 than pay $300 or $400 a month. And so they have to have 2.2 million people, 2.2 million young people sign up in order for the actuarial estimates to work that the insurance companies bid off of for this to be affordable. So to your question about what I think we should do, I think we should start over. I think that the premise that the federal government should set a floor where the ceiling once was. In other words, think about it as a car. It would be like saying to people, you can no longer buy Hyundai, Honda, General Motors, or Ford. Everybody in America should have a car, but it's going to have to at least be a Cadillac or a Lexus. Well, that sounds great in theory, and by the way, there's a lot more features on a Cadillac and a Lexus than there is on a Ford or a Chevy. No offense, I drive a Chevy, so I'm full disclosure. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if there's more features. It doesn't matter if it's a better car, or in this case, a better healthcare plan. If I can't afford it, if I don't have the extra money out of my pocket or the business can't afford it, it really doesn't matter. We need to let people have those choices. They need to be able to not only buy the health insurance that they wanted, but be able to go across states, state competition. We need to have a high-risk pool for people with pre-existing conditions. People ask me, how would you cover people with pre-existing conditions? The same way we cover people in this country. If you live in a hurricane zone or in a tornado alley or in a flood zone, the federal government backs up the loss that insurance companies will have in those areas so that they'll provide insurance in those areas. We can do the same thing, a federally backed high-risk pool for people with pre-existing conditions without destroying the 80% of Americans who had health insurance, liked it, wanted to keep it, and now because of the law aren't able to do so.
There are so many other topics to get to, and guess what?
Time is out.
We'll have to save it for next time. We've got immigration to talk about. We've got gun control to talk about. We'll save that for next time.
Let's do it in the new year.
All right, we'll plan on that. Speaking of the new year, we're going to have Congresswoman Cheri Bustos on January the 30th. We originally had hoped to have her next week, but due to scheduling problems, we'll make that January 30th for Congresswoman Cheri Bustos of the 17th Congressional District. Next week on At Issue, please join us for a discussion about the recovery in Washington, Pekin, and East Peoria, the recovery after the tornado. And we'll see you in 1 week on At Issue.